On today's show, the Houston Rockets clinched the 2 seed in the Western Conference with the Lakers' most recent loss, Amen Thompson's late push for Defensive Player of the Year, and the Wild Wild West. Denver and Memphis just absolutely falling apart. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Also, check out our Locked On Rockets newsletter. Would sincerely appreciate all of that support. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. Handful of things to get into on today's show, but the most important one, the Houston Rockets clinching the 2 seed in the Western Conference, courtesy of the loss that the Los Angeles Lakers faced against the Oklahoma City Thunder, or I guess took, whatever, holding the L against the OKC Thunder, which means that the Rockets are the 2 seed in the West. They have home court advantage through the entirety of the postseason, at least as far as Western Conference opponents are concerned, unless they wind up facing the OKC Thunder in an eventual Western Conference Finals. This is just an absolutely tremendous outcome for a Rockets team that went from not even making the play-in tournament last year, finishing the season at 41-41, to have the success that they had this season, to be likely the only other team not named the OKC Thunder to eclipse 50 wins in this Western Conference. And if you'll remember, my bold prediction for this year's Western Conference playoff race, seeding, all that, I said that I thought only one team was going to break 50 wins, and the Rockets were the team to come out and prove me dead wrong, hitting 52 wins. And look, they can lose out the rest of the season. It doesn't matter. They can finish 52-30. They still have the 2 seed. The Lakers mathematically cannot catch up to them. However, the downside is, even though they're in the 2 seed, they still have no clue who they're going to play in the first round. Things look like it's going to be either the Grizzlies or the Timberwolves as things are currently stand, but there are 4 teams, as I'm looking at the standings, all sitting at 47-32 right now. The Clippers, the Nuggets, the Warriors, and the Grizzlies all sitting at 47-32. The Wolves are at 46-33 in 8th place in the West, and then the Lakers are at 48-31 at 3rd place in the West. So there's still a possibility for the Rockets to face any one of those 6 teams in their first round series, but they will ultimately wind up playing the winner of the 7-8 matchup in the play-in tournament. So we won't find out until a little bit later on. It'll be early next week sometime when the 7 and 8 seeded play-in tournament games are played, that we'll ultimately learn who the Rockets will be facing in their first round playoff matchup. But they get home court. They have home court throughout the entirety of the playoffs. So first round, second round, all the way until the potential Western Conference Finals. And that's only if the Thunder actually make it to the Western Conference Finals. If some other team upsets the Thunder and the Rockets wind up making their way to the Western Conference Finals, they'll have home court advantage against everybody else in the Western Conference, regardless of outcome, whatever, a series upset, which is an exciting thing for a young team to have at their disposal, to give them a little bit of that home cook and that home court advantage. It's important for a young team. So tremendous outcome to this season. Not something that I expected from this group, but something that they absolutely fought for and earned with their consistent play all year long. And now the question kind of becomes rest versus rust. And this is the old, we talk about this every year with playoff teams, is how much rest outweighs the rust element, right? Do you want to keep your guys in rhythm? Do you want to work on anything schematically? Do you want to iron out anything, offensively, defensively that you would like to clean up or focus on before the playoffs arrive? And we see this with often, the true contending tier of teams, the this year it would be the Cavs, the Celtics, the Thunder, right? How important is it to actually rest your key contributors, rest your main guys ahead of the postseason versus making sure everybody is in rhythm, making sure everybody is playing at the best of their abilities, making sure your team is peaking at the right time? As it presently stands ahead of the Rockets-Clippers matchup out on the West Coast, the Rockets have 3 players listed as questionable or doubtful on the injury report. Fred VanVleet is listed as doubtful, and Jabari Smith Jr. and Alperen Sengun are both listed as questionable. So this could be the start of the Rockets essentially resting some of their key guys. Maybe they cycle guys in and out of the lineup as we navigate these final 3 games of the regular season. I don't think it's necessarily worthwhile to flat out rest 2 or 3 guys and then play the other key contributors. I think you either go all or nothing with it. My personal preference when I see teams battling rest versus rust is actually to play your regular rotation, play your regular starters for one half of basketball, right? Spend the first half playing hard, play a regular game, because that's the other unique thing is these final 3 games against the Clippers, then against the Lakers, and then the final home game of the regular season against the Denver Nuggets on Sunday. All 3 of these teams are very much still fighting for their seeding, for their positioning, for their playoff livelihood. And so these are going to be legitimate games for the other teams. Now, for the Rockets, they can punt on all 3 of these games. Doesn't matter. They could rest every single guy. They could bring up the entire Viper squad if they wanted to and just run with that for the next 3 games and prioritize rest above everything else. To me, that's not the best outcome. To me, the best outcome is get a decent look at these 3 teams to close out the season, right? You've already gotten a good look at the Lakers in the last time these 2 teams met up, but get a good look at the Clippers with a healthy Kawhi. Get a good look at the Nuggets, TBD on if they have Jamal Murray available, but get some data points against these teams. Play your full rotation for half the game, if that, maybe 3 quarters, and then rest at the very end, right? To me, that seems the best of both worlds. You make sure guys are still in a good rhythm. You're able to work on some things schematically that you might want to see or test out a little bit before the playoffs, and you get some data points on the other team, right? No coach is really going to show their full hand this close to the postseason, although with the Denver Nuggets and firing Michael Malone, who knows what they're going to look like as a team going into this postseason, and that's something we're going to cover a little bit later on in the episode, the Wild Wild West, the state of the Western Conference, all the topsy-turviness going on with the Denver Nuggets and the Memphis Grizzlies, and how the Rockets may be able to capitalize on some of that down the line. But coming up, I do want to talk about Amen Thompson and his late push for Defensive Player of the Year. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your physical health, but traditional in-person therapy can be a bit expensive at times, often ranging from $100 to even $250 per session. That's where BetterHelp comes in. With online therapy, you get quality care at a price that makes sense, saving you time and money. Therapy isn't just for life's toughest moments. It can help with everyday stress, learning how to set boundaries, or developing positive coping skills. Having access to support when you need it can make a big difference. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Let's talk a little bit about Amen Thompson, who is gaining quick recognition for the work that he's done on the defensive side of the basketball. And unfortunately, this Rockets season, because the Rockets caught so many teams kind of by surprise this year with how good they were, how effective they were, and just how much of a step forward they took organizationally this season, it feels like, unfortunately, that Amen Thompson was a little bit late to the Defensive Player of the Year propaganda push party, if you will, because a lot of the way these NBA awards are discussed and talked about and pushed for throughout the season, a lot of them are narrative-based awards. They are. Like, the whole idea that Draymond Green is even remotely in the running for Defensive Player of the Year this season is kind of media conjecture at this point. It's based on his prior standing as a defensive player of the year. It's based on his historical body of work. It's not really based, it feels like, at least to me, it's not really based on anything that he's doing that's so magnificent this season in particular. But these last couple games, the last couple wins the Rockets have had, big time wins against the OKC Thunder, where you had Amen Thompson clamping SGA, and then the big win against the Golden State Warriors, where Amen Thompson shadowed Steph Curry and just completely eliminated him from the contest. It felt like these are games that are going to go a long way for Amen in kind of deciding his candidacy this season. And selfishly enough, I will highlight that one of the reasons that I'd like the Rockets not to just exclusively punt on these remaining 3 games is if the Rockets can actually close out this schedule, a schedule that is still an absolute gauntlet against 3 more teams, the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Nuggets, who are all still vying for positioning, who are still very much trying to win these games in order to position themselves better for a postseason run, that would go a long way in cementing the Rockets as potentially legitimate title threats in the eyes of everybody else in the NBA landscape, but also more specifically for Amen Thompson, right? Assuming he's able to have some really strong performances in these games, guarding one of James Harden and Kawhi Leonard, or Luka, Reeves, and LeBron, or in the final game of the season, if Jamal Murray's healthy, then clamping him, whatever. Seeing Amen Thompson continue to put on this kind of defensive showcase to end the regular season could go a really long way in swaying some voters as it pertains to his chance at winning Defensive Player of the Year. Now, I will say, even though I think that Amen Thompson has a fantastic case to win Defensive Player of the Year, it doesn't feel like it's going to be his year to win it. And I hate to be the wet blanket, I hate to be the party pooper here, but at least he's garnering enough attention here at the end of the season. And he was inserted into the Rockets starting lineup when Jabari got hurt back in January, hasn't left the starting lineup since then. When he's healthy, when he's available, he is a starter. He is going to be a starter for this Houston Rockets team forever now. He is permanently in the starting lineup. That is no longer changing. You know that Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun, assuming they're still on the roster past this offseason, they are going to be starters. The Rockets now have 3/5 of their starting lineup permanently decided upon. The other variables to consider, and whether or not Fred sticks around long-term or DB gets included in a trade package for somebody else, who knows? But those 3 guys are your cornerstones. Those are your mainstays. And it is going to be a lot easier for Amen Thompson to make a Defensive Player of the Year award push next year when he's actually starting all 82 games of the regular season, rather than coming off the bench to start the season and then being inserted in the starting lineup about halfway through the campaign. So that's at least one silver lining here to think about, is that people are starting to take note of Amen Thompson's impact defensively, and that should hopefully have some carryover into next season. He is easily first-team all-defense. If he doesn't get first-team all-defense, then the voters are not paying attention, and it wouldn't surprise me if the voters weren't paying attention, but Amen Thompson should absolutely get at least first-team all-defensive honors this season. Now, I will say there was a fantastic article written by Danny Chow over at The Ringer, and just highlighting the uniqueness of Amen Thompson as a defender. And I'm not going to go through the whole article here, but I wanted to highlight a couple different points that, a couple of different factoids that Danny brought up in his very well-written piece. I highly suggest you go take a look at it. I'm going to put a link to the article in the episode description for you to peruse at your leisure. But let's highlight a couple things that he pointed out here. First off, the numbers are well and good. Only 15 other players in the past 50 years have logged a full season of his per-game averages in points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. That's how unique what Amen Thompson is doing is happening. Only 15 other players have done this so far for what he's produced this season. Here's another one. There are only 6 other players with at least 2,000 minutes played during the season who have ever recorded a steal and block rate comparable to Amen's output this season, while also fouling as little as he has per 100 possessions. And that list includes Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Kevin Garnett, Ben Wallace, Andre Karolinko, Anthony Davis, and Victor Wembanyama. That is an absolutely absurd list of all-time defensive greats to be mentioned with if you're Amen Thompson. And Danny continues to write, therein lies the absurdity of Amen's potential. He has the processing and flexibility of a guard, the frame and explosion of an archetypal swingman, and the statistical profile of a 6'11" defensive alpha. Beautifully written, because Amen Thompson is multiple players rolled into one. He really is a Swiss Army knife. There isn't anything that Amen Thompson can't do on a basketball floor. He can guard your best player every single night. He can hound and stick with, because he's got the speed and the quickness and the lateral movement ability to stick with smaller, quick twitch kind of players, guards and whatnot. You can park him on an athletic wing. You can have him guard Luka and LeBron one possession, and then he can go put the clamps on Jalen Brunson the very next possession. And you can even rely on him in a switch. Think about the moment where he blocked Evan Mobley, guarding Evan Mobley on a post-up in I think it was the second game that the Rockets beat the Cavaliers. There isn't anything that he can't do on the basketball court. And as it currently stands, mentioned this in our segment 1, but right now, the more likely outcome for the Rockets in their first round series, at least if the playoffs started today, would be one of the Timberwolves or the Grizzlies. And each of those teams has their own superstar talent, right? They've got Anthony Edwards in Minnesota, and they've got Ja Morant in Memphis. And both of those guys have dealt with Amen Thompson throughout this season. And it's actually, the results are fairly identical. So Danny wrote, it's not pretty, and the results are damn near identical. Both Edwards and Ja Morant have only hit 33% of their 18 shot attempts with Amen as their primary defender. They've both been blocked by Thompson twice. It's curtains for whoever Amen Thompson is guarding as his primary, as the primary defender. And oftentimes what we do see in games where Amen Thompson is the primary on a player like an Anthony Edwards or like a Ja Morant, or most recently like a Steph Curry, a majority of the actual shot attempts or a majority of the makes tend to happen when Amen Thompson gets switched off of that player, or when Amen Thompson is resting on the bench and that player is able to get a little bit of a rhythm going without Amen Thompson absolutely shadowing them and just completely removing their impact from the game across the board. So I want to finish with the best line in the entire article to me, and it just got a full-on belly laugh for me. But Danny said that Amen affects the players around him like a bong rip, and everyone watching is stoned in the hot box. That is an all-time line to somehow try and encapsulate and describe the sheer impact that Amen Thompson has on the game around him. I highly suggest you go check out the article. Danny did a phenomenal job with it. Link in the episode description. But again, Amen Thompson and his impact this year cannot be overstated how integral he's been to the Rockets' success, to their ability to go from being the 10th best NBA defense last year to hovering top 5 all season long. And it's only going to get better from here. He's only in year 2. That's the crazy thing. And I see a future where Amen Thompson is going to win multiple Defensive Player of the Year trophies. Might not be his year this season, but at least the recognition is there and it's growing. And hopefully this can be the start of a push for him to win DPOY next year. Coming up, want to talk about the wild, wild west state of things in the Western Conference. The Denver Nuggets and Memphis Grizzlies crashing out hard here at the end of the regular season, and how the Rockets might be in a position to capitalize on one of, if not both, of those two teams. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%, plus you also get 4% APY on your cash in non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk, rate subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national savings average account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, let's talk a little bit about this wild Western Conference where things never cease to surprise, amaze, all of the above, with the Denver Nuggets electing to fire head coach Michael Malone and general manager Calvin Booth with just a handful of games left in the regular season. Never seen anything like it. It was a ridiculous shock to the system when Taylor Jenkins got canned with the Memphis Grizzlies with 8 games left in the regular season. This is just absolutely unheard of. And look, it makes sense if you wanted to move on from your GM. You wanted to put a new butt in the GM chair, maybe change the direction the franchise is going, have a fresh set of eyes to look over everything like, draft evaluations and scouting reports and kind of tinkering with and figuring out the direction that the organization needs to go over these next 2 or 3 months, because this is arguably the most important 2 or 3 month long stretch for any NBA executive. So getting rid of Booth, sure, makes sense. Firing Michael Malone is absolutely unhinged. It's wild. The guy that brought Denver a championship in the first place, to can him with this few games, with literally on the doorstep of the NBA playoffs, makes no sense. You cannot sit here and try and tell me that the Denver Nuggets are going to be in a strategically better position to succeed this postseason by anointing Rick Adelman's son, who is it? It's Dan Adelman, I think, if I'm not mistaken, as the interim head coach to try and guide this team through the final few games of the regular season and then whatever the postseason looks like for this squad. There's no way. This had to have been done to appease somebody, had to have been done to appease, more than likely anybody, Nikola Jokic. And there was reportedly some rumblings about Jokic's discontent, his frustrations with, the situation in Denver, not necessarily specifically anything about his relationship with Michael Malone or the rest of the coaching staff, but where there is smoke, there is fire. And for teams like the Grizzlies who can Taylor Jenkins, for teams like the Nuggets who have now moved on from Michael Malone, this presents a real, first and foremost, teams that are in the playoff race being unstable and having, uncertain futures and kind of this cloud hanging over the franchise always bodes well for the Rockets. Anytime there's instability anywhere else in the Western Conference, that's a good thing for the Houston Rockets, because the Rockets have been incredibly stable under the stewardship of Ime Udoka. So this could be potentially the end of the current era of Grizzlies basketball and or Denver Nuggets basketball. Now, maybe that's, me completely overstepping here. It could be as simple as these two teams are going to canvas. They're going to bring in new head coaches. They've still got their rosters in place, all that good stuff. But the Denver angle is really interesting, especially from the perspective of a player with as much star power and as much say-so as Nikola Jokic has. If he's upset in Denver, first off, as long as somebody somewhere, as long as Nico Harrison or as long as Rob Pelinka doesn't have another cup of coffee, at his disposal, I think the rest of the NBA world is pretty safe. But for Jokic to potentially be on the market this offseason, that would take things going from 0 to 100 real quick, right? But if Jokic can't get on board with the direction that the Nuggets franchise is going, if he's upset with things, if he's, frustrated, if he demands out, if he wants a trade request or demands a trade request, there's a handful of teams in the NBA that are primed and ready to offer an insane haul to get the NBA's 3-time MVP, arguably the best player currently on the planet, in Nikola Jokic. And the Rockets are absolutely one of those teams. And to a lesser degree, the same can be said for the Memphis Grizzlies with Triple J or Ja Morant or Desmond Bane. Like, the moment any team shows any level of instability and uncertainty about their future, especially when they have star players, when they've got good pieces that can be, picked apart and salvaged, and brought to a new situation, that's really enticing. It's really exciting for opposing teams to take a look at. And so the Rockets are no different. And I think you got to look at this from a couple different lenses. One, in that I'm not nearly as worried about the Grizzlies and or the Nuggets going into this postseason as I would have been if they had just maintained status quo. Even though they've had, largely disappointing seasons relative to likely some of the expectations for both those organizations, they're not going to be in a better spot strategically, schematically, whatever, to try and have a first round upset or make a deep playoff push as they would have been just keeping their head coaches in place in Taylor Jenkins and Michael Malone. There's no way. You can't convince me otherwise. So I think it helps in the here and now for the Rockets because those are two very unstable organizations, teams that are probably not going to be as good as they would have been had they just kept their regular head coaches in place if the Rockets face them in the first round, second round, third, Western Conference Finals, whatever. But then even beyond that, looking at the lay of the land of the Western Conference for this upcoming offseason and for years to come, this could signal another power shift in the Western Conference. If Nikola Jokic demands out of Denver, then Denver has no choice but to try and deal him, or you try and, hold on to an upset superstar and it becomes a toxic situation. And it looks like what happened with the Rockets with the 9 games that they played with James Harden before his famous speech of the situation is crazy. I don't think it can be fixed. All of that, right? And that's one less contender on the board, one less playoff competitor on the board if you're the Rockets to have to worry about as far as seeding, as far as scheduling, playing that team 4 times in the regular season and dealing with them, trying to, fight for their own positioning in the playoffs, all of that, right? But the most interesting angle is just what would it cost if you're sitting here as a Rockets fan and you're looking over the fence at the Denver Nuggets, or again, to a lesser degree, the Memphis Grizzlies, right? What would it cost to swoop in and try and get your hands on one of their star players? Because if you're able to buy low, if you're able to operate from a position of leverage because Jokic is demanding out, or Ja Morant doesn't want to be in Memphis anymore, or Jaren Jackson Jr. is fed up over there, what would it cost? And I am not even going to explore that on today's episode. That is a whole episode worthy of content to track down and figure out and explore. But it's at least worth noting that there is, however minuscule the possibility is, that Nikola Jokic wants out of Denver this summer, and the Rockets could be in a position to offer a absolute godfather package to pick up Jokic and pair him with whoever's left of who's not included in that package. And then that becomes the argument is it worth it? You're already the number 2 team in the Western Conference. Is it worth it to blow up what this team has accomplished this season in order to add the best player on the planet? Goes back to some of the similar arguments that you hear when we talk about the Rockets potentially pursuing Kevin Durant, which is why I'm currently sitting on the opinion of you only trade for KD if it's getting rid of the parts that you don't really need anymore. And, whether or not they still need, Fred VanVleet is, up for debate. But, if you can get KD for a cheap package, you do it. You do it in a heartbeat because nobody can do what KD does. If you can get Jokic, and if you can add Jokic to this Rockets roster and still keep a couple of the other key contributors, key pieces, do you do it? Or are you then in a worse spot than where the Denver Nuggets are at without the right pieces around Jokic to really contend for a title? Who knows? But I leave you with that, dear listener. Would you want to see the Rockets go after Nikola Jokic or Ja Morant or Triple J this offseason if the Grizzlies and Nuggets decide to tear it apart, or if those two teams continue to implode this offseason? Give me your thoughts on that. Give me your thoughts on Amen Thompson and his late push for Defensive Player of the Year. Maybe I'm too down on it. Maybe he does pull off a dark horse upset and win DPOY this season. That would be fantastic. However, I don't really think it's going to happen this year. However, he'll be in the running for many more DPOY awards going forward. And how excited are you about the Rockets clinching the 2 seed? Let me know all of your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Remember, the best way to help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Also, check out the Locked On Rockets newsletter. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.